What a time to be talking about spiritual prosperity, isn't it? Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about this morning. It's a good time during the pandemic, this COVID-19, when my understanding is 20% of people in the United States are unemployed. 20%. That's pretty remarkable. And then what's also remarkable to me is the conversations coming from the governmental administration about how important it is that we open up. And I think open up stores, open up the beaches, open up the churches and so forth. And I was thinking it's kind of a twofold problem. First of all, the 20% that are unemployed, they can't afford to go into opened restaurants, to go into department stores and spend their money. Right now, they're just struggling to make their mortgage payments, to pay the electric bill, to make sure their family has food on the table. On the other hand, and this is the problem, if the stores don't open up, then the people that work there don't have a job to go back to put food on their table. It's, what is the word, conundrum? It is a conundrum, how to handle it. Well, that's where today's talk comes in. What is spiritual prosperity? Let me begin with a quotation from Mother Teresa. It's very interesting. She says, the trouble is that rich people, well-to-do people, very often don't really know who the poor are. I think this would resolve the conundrum. If our government, our present-day government, the government of the United States, that's all I can speak about, if they, as rich people, because those in our administration today, 90% are rich. 90% are rich. If they really knew about poverty, if they themselves were poor, I strongly believe, I hopefully believe, I truly believe that there would not be a conundrum. They can't solve the problem because the rich do not know the poor. And I'm speaking in general terms. So let me read this again. The trouble is that rich people, well-to-do people, she said, very often don't really know who the poor are. And that is, and this is only Mother Teresa can say this, and that is why we can forgive them. For knowledge can only lead to love, and love to service. And so, if they are not touched by them, if the rich are not touched by the poor, it's because they do not know them. Powerful. The talk this morning. Let me share 3 important definitions so we can better understand spirituality, and prosperity. Because if we don't understand those 3 terms, we're not going to understand what spiritual prosperity is. So spirit. From the teaching, it says, we learned that spirit is the divine aspect found within our soul, found within our human soul. That spirit, it is the divine aspect that's found within our human soul. Helena Blavatsky defined spirit as, and I quote, that which belongs directly to universal consciousness. That which belongs directly to universal consciousness. That's what she defines spirit as. So thus we can understand spirit as that which is one with the creative life. The one with the creative life. Now, spirituality. Spirituality is the result of our contact with spirit. What a simple definition. Spirituality. Someone asks you, are you spiritual? Think about what they're really asking. Chances are they don't really mean what we understand spirituality as. But if an esoteric student, a student of the teaching, asks what spirituality is, are you spiritual? Spirituality is the result of our contact with spirit. Simple, simple. We are made of both spirit and matter. If 20% of our consciousness is fused with the spirit within, then we are 20% spiritual. So we could even carry that over into the actions of our day-to-day life. For example, when we are engaged in conversation, is our conversation 20% spirit and 80% material or matter? We want to, as spiritual students, we want to begin to think, to organize, to observe our process of engaging with others during the day. And with all that we do during the day, all that we do as we engage in labor for hierarchy, to ask ourselves, how much spirit am I in what I am doing? Am I 20% or am I 80%? If we are only 20% spiritual, that means that what we think, what we do, and what we are in alignment with is just 20% of the divine purpose. That we are only in alignment as spiritual beings with 20% of Christ, 20% of hierarchy, 20% of the plan of Shambhala, 20% in alignment with the lords of Shambhala. Our goal is to become 30 and 40 and 50 and 60 and 70 and 80% in alignment, in contact with these great beings so that we can be better servants to hierarchy. It also means, if we stay with this 20% figure, it means that 20% of us is advancing. This is the positive side. Or even if we're only 10%, it would mean that 10% or 20% is progressing toward the realization of a vision, or progressing to 10 or 20% of the realization of an ideal. So the more spiritual we are, the more sensitive we are. Using this equation, it also means that 80% left needs to be spiritualized. And I think this is what brings us into the magnetic sphere of the teaching. This is what creates that inner powerful impulse to transform ourselves and to find advancing and progressing ways to bring about that transformation. And if we are truly, sincerely, and deeply and honestly striving to experience that transformation, it means we are willing to work for it, not to have others work for it for us. See, but we have such a strong desire, strong impulse to undergo the process of transformation. We are willing to work for it. And that willingness, I truly believe this, even if it is an unconscious process of our thinking, that process magnetizes our desire, and that desire pulls us into a magnetic field in which we find the teaching. We find the teacher. And in finding the teacher and the teaching, now we have the opportunity to increase our spirituality, increase our sensitivity. And with that process of increasing our spirituality, we are increasing our prosperity. As our consciousness registers the currents and rays that come from the thought form of prosperity, we are putting the energy of prosperity into motion. The purer our consciousness, the less karmic obstructions we have from the personality life. The purer our consciousness, the greater our prosperity will be. Now, meditation. Meditation is a way to increase our prosperity. It is through meditation and contemplation that we will expand our consciousness. And that expansion, see, this is the way I view expansion of consciousness. Right now, my dogs, my 3 beautiful Sheltie puppies, their consciousness is focused only on their food, their treats, going in the car, taking walks with mom, right? And finding their pillows where they can sleep. That's the extent of their consciousness. Some human beings, the circumference of their consciousness is their family, is their bank account, is what kind of house do they live in, what kind of neighborhood do they live in. They're not even yet aware of their community. But as our consciousness, the circumference of our life expands, and our consciousness expands, our sensitivity is increasing. That sensitivity then takes us into compassion, understanding, tolerance, love, joy, freedom. And pretty soon, this circumference of our life, this circle of our, how can I say this? The circle of our perspective is so huge, it is so broad, it is so vast. Now we're sensitive to those that live in Europe. We're aware of what's going on in the different governmental administrations in Europe, in Russia, in London, in Switzerland, in Germany. So we've gone from our puppy pillows into becoming so sensitive and so aware of what's going on in the world. Our prosperity at the same time is increasing. There is a difference between material prosperity and spiritual prosperity. There is a difference. Material prosperity can be a lack of spiritual prosperity. Isn't that interesting? And we go back. I've got to reread that. I just thought it was so profound. The trouble is that rich people, well-to-do people, very often don't really know who the poor are. Why? Because they are so blinded by their material prosperity. I cannot begin to tell you the numbers of people that have come through and the front door and out the back door of our White Mountain organization. They come through the front door and they look for our wealth. They look for the members of the group to see how rich they are. And if they're not rich and if they're not wealthy, they go out the back door because all they measure, see, that little part of their circle of what they call life is measured in money and dollars. I had a person tell me one day, how can you be teaching a meditation course called prosperity when you are so poor? We are not poor people. We are prosperous people. We are spiritually prosperous as well. When there's a balance, and our balance is material and spiritual prosperity. That's the balance of this group. So if somebody comes into your family or into your church and all they can see is material abundance, that means that's all that their life has and is made of, material abundance. But we need to have the balance. We need to have the balance of material and spiritual prosperity. So material prosperity can be a lack of spiritual prosperity. Material prosperity can be a lack of spiritual prosperity. Spiritual prosperity is listen to this, spiritual prosperity is the result of spiritual abundance. For those of us that meditate, those of us that have 1,000 books of the teaching on our bookshelves, and they're all dog-eared, they don't look brand new, they're all dog-eared and so well read. That's spiritual abundance because we've assimilated everything that's in those books. We are now living the teaching. That's spiritual abundance. That's spiritual prosperity. It is also called the law of abundance. It is when the law of abundance is used for selfish means. Isn't that interesting? The law of abundance can be used for selfish means an accumulation of abundance for personal interest. Personal interest. I'll give you this donation, but these are the strings that come with that donation. Material prosperity becomes a creator of karma. See, that's the teaching. It's not based on the IRS laws and rules. It's not based on a person's gold in Fort Knox. It's like there is a institution in the Scottsdale, Phoenix area that is like Fort Knox. You have so much gold, you go into that building, you register under a pseudonym, I kid you not, a pseudonym, and you can put all of your wealth in that institution. And you go in and you go out under a different name. Different name. That's not spiritual prosperity. That's this popular word that's being bantied about these days, that's hoarding. That's hoarding your wealth. It's not sharing. Material prosperity at that point becomes a creator of karma. Christ knew about this. He said, first, seek the kingdom of God, and then everything else will be given to you. But first you have to seek the kingdom of God, not Fort Knox. Thus, abundance is the one, and this is a quote, the one from whom all things proceed and to whom all things will return. See, karma is the law of cause and effect. Abundance in the universe is unending. It is a law. The universe, in essence, is in each one of us. Thus, so is abundance. The universal consciousness that Blavatsky was talking about, we would perhaps better relate to it by using the term cosmic self. The cosmic self has created a law for those who work and labor and reap according to the seeds and the quality of their labor. In other words, according to the quality of the seeds that we have planted and the service that we are engaged in will result in the percentage of our prosperity. We must also keep in mind that the law of abundance has cycles or seasons that seem to be controlled or recycled by personal, group, national, and global karma. If you're old enough to have gone through these seasons and kept track of them, mentally kept track of them, you're going to see how these seasons, these cycles, have operated in your life and why and how. Not only watched the process, but understood the process and how the process works. It's truly a wonderful exercise to observe while you're living it. Much of humanity falls into the karma of mine and yours due to the physical plane life. Mine and yours. It is especially on the physical plane the law of abundance falls into limitations. Cause and effect. Karma. However, the more we dissipate the mine and yours, karma of thinking, the door of abundance will open to us. Well, I'll tell you, I had a teacher tell me, oh my gosh, maybe 25, 30 years ago, we were all in a meeting together and total in bliss because we loved him so much, still do. And one of the people that were there in the gathering said, you know, I'm really conflicted because I don't know if I should donate my money to your group or to my group. And he said, dear, don't worry about it. We are all one. And then I went home and get out the checkbook. How are we going to pay our bills? And I'm thinking, we're all one. We're all one. I thought, man, this is really hard to understand. But years later, now I get it. I get it. It has to do with spiritual prosperity, not material prosperity. The door of abundance will open to us. This means in the domain of abundance, all that is mine is yours, and all that is yours is mine. In the life of discipleship and upon the path of initiation, we are striving to obey the law of abundance by giving the law, all that is mine is yours, and all that is yours is mine. In other words, the law of unity, the law of unity. I recall a teacher saying once, those who give their money to organizations who are working for hierarchy are helping humanity. And this is an expression of the law of unity. Until, how can I say this? Until this law of unity is coursing through your bloodstream, you will not understand it. I guarantee you it is not an intellectual anything or other. It's not mental gymnastics. It's not reading a book and say, oh yeah, that's unity. It's living it. It's knowing the poor and understanding and helping. And knowing the difference between material prosperity and spiritual prosperity. Material prosperity says, I need more and more. This is why there's still no toilet paper on the shelves. Now I was managed to get out to the grocery store a couple of days ago, and I always like to go down that aisle because this is how I can see progression. Well, now they're carrying off-brand. Oh, okay, well, if you're really in bad shape. Because it's cheaper quality. That's the only thing, it's cheaper quality. Material prosperity says, I need more and more. More expensive houses, more expensive cars, more expensive clothes, country club memberships, more riches, more money, so I can be happy. Spiritual prosperity says, in my soul, I know I do not lack anything. A fact that inspires us to align our life to the universal life, that brings spiritual fulfillment into manifestation. It is into the ocean of materialism that so many have dropped their anchor. In the ocean of materialism. An anchor that gives birth to fear of lack, from which are born the children of jealousy, anger, hatred, and revenge. These attachments create poverty of the soul. It's so interesting. It's like when I go home this afternoon and I go back into the office, my home office, and I open up the computer and I see, those that were on the webinar today and the level of their interests. Go to webinar, it really gives us statistics that one wonders how they even gather those statistics. And then the next thing is that I learn those who donated to the teaching each Sunday. And it blows my mind. People that don't know us, they're contributing. Even if it is $5, I know that $5 is like $100 to someone else. And they're giving that $5 so that we can do what we do on Sundays and publications and all that we do, all based on donations. That's spiritual prosperity. It's not, oh, no. If I give this $5, then I'm going to be void of all that money all week long. It was like when the kids and I were divorced, and I was sitting in a pew in a church, and they passed, the collection plate. Truly, I had a nickel for the whole week. And I took the nickel out and I put it in the collection plate, and as everybody's watching me, And I thought to myself, they can do a lot more with this nickel than I can do. Well, I get some feedback from the church about that. Somebody told them that I only contributed 5 cents, and they took it as they were offended. Well, I did never go back to that church. But what was so cool was that the next day, Monday, when I went to the post office and got my mail, there was a $50 check. That's spiritual prosperity. How can a person or a group give more to the spiritual life and less to the physical life, but still have their needs met? There's an interesting story which I believe can give us a hint about the answer to this question. We were told that Christ did not have any place to sleep, but very rich people opened their doors to have him eat with them, to sleep with them, to feast with them, and to dress the best. Everyone gave gifts that you cannot imagine. For example, the 3 magi brought the most expensive gifts to him. He had everything. He did not need many things. Also, his physical body was perfect. He had perfect emotions and the purest thoughts. That was his physical side. Because he had everything else, he totally dedicated himself to make people physically and spiritually prosperous. Buddha did not have artificial and imposed needs. People say the Buddha did not have anything, but some powerful kings gave him hundreds of acres of property, temples, buildings. He had everything. Why did he have them? Because he did not attach to those things that were given to him. Many people believe that in order to demonstrate their spirituality, they must demonstrate material poverty. This is wrong. If you drive a junk car, people will not respect your spirituality. If you live in the poverty section of your community or dress in the worst clothes in order to be spiritual, you are attached to your fears and have cut yourself from the law of abundance. In other words, from spiritual prosperity. The key to spiritual prosperity is that your physical life and your spiritual life are not 2 different paths, but one. You cannot have a spiritual vision that has no practical application to your life, and that's vital. It's vital to understand. You cannot have a spiritual vision that has no practical application to your life and others. Nor can you have a physical path that is created for your own prosperity. If you live your life in this manner, where there is a division between your physical life and your spiritual life, karma will put your cycle of prosperity into the winter season, the season of hibernation, until you pay your karma and learn the lessons of the law of abundance. The law of abundance comes in many forms, from money to belongings and real estate, to the abundance of intellectual property, creativity, and ideas. Others want to have abundance in love. And finally, there are those who want to have the abundance of heart qualities, psychic energy, and fiery energy of enthusiasm that is gained from contact with the hierarchy. The law of abundance was created by God to give humanity a great treasury of resources. See, this abundance was not, do you live on the other side of the tracks or this side? It is not, I feel so sorry for them. They don't have any money, but we're okay. It's sickening to think that way. It's sickening to go out during the pandemic and hoard and buy as much as you can buy, stuff your freezers full, your garage full of things, while your next door neighbor is suffering. And to feel that you're better than they. Your winter is coming, your season of winter. This is the law of unity, the law of abundance that was created by God to give humanity a great treasury of resource is the law of unity. Whether it is individual unity, group, national, or global unity, unity leads to abundance and prosperity. We are taught that spiritual abundance must be the first order before we can properly and constructively use material abundance. First, seek the kingdom of God. And that's not what we are taught. We, the royal, the general, we. Why do you go to college? So you make more money. All lowercase. We are teaching. The teaching is teaching. Spiritual abundance must be the first order before we can properly and constructively use material abundance. Abundance in the universe is unending. It is a law. Can we be daring enough to say the law of prosperity and the law of abundance are part of the same law? It is important that we strive to broaden our consciousness in such a way that we include these two laws, the law of prosperity, the law of abundance, and put them into action every day of our lives. We need to be aware of the law of abundance and use this gift responsibly in the light of the law of prosperity. I was reading the other day a paper written by Dr. Peter Timmerman. Dr. Timmerman is a leading Western Buddhist commentator and research director of an organization called the International Federation of Institutes of Advanced Study. This is a federation that engages in major research of key global issues. And let me say it again, the International Federation of Institutes of Advanced Study. It was in 1995 he wrote a paper on the addiction of consumerism. In this paper he said, and I quote, "The openness to abundance is complicated by our society, by the fact that our current world view is based on a belief in the fundamental scarcity of nature. Traditional cultures have always believed that the world is fundamentally abundant. Traditional cultures, that God will provide, even though there are occasional scarcities, usually caused by human transgression of sacred rights." Think about St. Sergius and his biography and that story. I won't go into because we don't have time, but think about it. Okay. These rules, says Dr. Timmerman, are caused by human transgression of sacred rights. The human transgression of sacred rights. These rules are founded on the principle that gifts must be respected, and waste is a sign of disrespect. I remember some time ago when I was called in for counseling by a young, very wealthy young woman who was being sued to the hilt. And she called me in for counseling to help her learn how to fight these lawsuits, how to maintain her money. And she was desperate. She was desperately in need. And so I drove my little car over there and spent an hour helping her. She immediately called the right lawyer, won all the lawsuits. But the point is, when we walked out of her house, we walked out together because she had an appointment. She got in her Lexus. I got in my Chevy with a check for $25. Yeah. I drove away from that. Okay, I have something to learn in this. It's very interesting to see people. And I go back to, if I can find it, Mother Teresa. If you don't know the poor, if you haven't been touched by poverty, the trouble is that rich people, well-to-do people, very often don't really know who the poor are. Dr. Timmerman also said, there is a desperate need in the West to produce and to consume, which is driven by a kind of panic and mistrust. He said, waste is the dark side of this, and he believes the human creation of pseudo-abundance is in fact causing the rest of the world to become scarce. He also presents a case in his paper on the subject of poverty and frugality by way of the life of St. Francis and others as a way to strip away possessions and thus forcing attention to be paid to the abundance of what is given freely by God in the compassion of others. In stating the story of the exemplary life of poverty by St. Francis, he wrote that this draws a humble attentiveness to the belief that simple things can result in the discovery of untold wealth lying around everywhere. And with the breaking down of the barrier of possessions, there can also emerge a new awareness of the community of all beings, as expressed by St. Francis in his Song of the Creation. He wrote that St. Francis discovered that voluntary poverty is the gamble on the law of abundance, on taking no thought for the morrow, on throwing oneself into the hands of God. St. Francis was born in 1181. That's a while ago. He died in October, actually, of 1226 when he was 44. When you read of the life of this well-known saint, you quickly become aware of his connection with the higher worlds and cosmic laws. In the book, The Spring of Prosperity by Torquem Serdarian, he says, spiritual prosperity expresses itself as 12 virtues. If you develop them and bring them into your spiritual awareness and manifest them, then you are the most prosperous person in the world. The book also indicates people try to be prosperous from the wrong end. It reads, physical prosperity always, in all circumstances, brings suffering and pain if the spiritual manifestation of prosperity does not exist for the person. In closing, let me give you the list of these 12 virtues. The sense of beauty, the sense of universality, the sense of direction, the sense of righteousness, the sense of purity, joy and enthusiasm, the sense of service, the sense of harmlessness, the sense of compassion, the sense of sacrifice, the sense of gratitude, and the sense of striving. It is the expression of these 12 virtues which reflects spiritual prosperity. And in increasing the potential of prosperity in our personality and spiritual life is the expression found by living these 12 virtues. Each virtue is a path, and this is why virtues are so important to put into our life. Each virtue is a path, a current of energy from the universal consciousness, from the cosmic self. As the currents of these virtues travel from subjective into objective manifestation, they serve us as guides into the higher worlds and spiritual prosperity. So and thus, virtues become our eternal companions on the path of infinity. That's it. So that's spiritual prosperity. It's pretty beautiful.